So today, being that it is Father's Day, it is our day of honoring our fathers and father figures. I am and have been remembering my dad, Carl Zavada, Carl E. Zavada. And I'm remembering that week when he left this earthly realm. It was April, and we thought Dad was probably going to leave on Easter. It seemed, fitting that he would, do the resurrection thing on Easter. But no, Dad was an accountant his entire life, and he waited till April 15th. Dad was like, I'm out of here. No more taxes for me. Dad always had a quirky, fun sense of humor, and he went out with it. Next Sunday, as I mentioned, next Sunday is the year, I don't know if I did mention it, it is the year to the day, June 23rd, that my mom left this earthly realm. Next Sunday, we have Will Wilkinson that's going to speak for us, too, which is very exciting. I'll mention more in the announcements. So yes, it's a very tender time for me, and I have shared in this last year, since we began in November, the journey of my mom's earthly passing and how much I have grown. I've just had such an incredible time of transformation through her passage and through connecting with her in her non-physical consciousness. And because, is that Mom calling? That figures, right on cue. It's funny, I had the strangest thing happen this morning. I wasn't going to even say this, but I've never had my iPhone send me those photographic memories where they put them to music. I was in the bathroom and the phone started playing music, and I looked down and it's this memory of Mom. It's all these pictures of Mom. And fascinating, the last picture was the picture I took of her right before she went in for cremation. So I thought, whoa, okay, that really goes with this talk today on reincarnation. I know, it was uncanny, but it was just like Mom. She's been giving me all kinds of messages. And especially through electronics, it's fascinating. But many of us, perhaps have only one parent or maybe both parents that are not in their physical body. And also, we're probably becoming more aware. I see a lot of beautiful silver hair in here, including mine, that, life is precious and short. Our time is brief here. And, we don't know how much time we have left in this world. We don't know if we just have this day. So I think it's really inspiring and interesting to talk about death and life and death and immortality and rebirth. So that's what I'm speaking of. We often speak on consciousness, the consciousness we are as being immortal. My spiritual teacher, Amma, her formal name is Mata Amritananda Mayi, which means Mother of Immortal Bliss. And so it's a name that expresses what she's identified with, which is the mother of all that is, and immortality itself, and bliss, which is the quality of God consciousness. So to merge in her consciousness, to merge in God consciousness, Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, is to know our essential being as immortal. And I spoke on last week identifying with life itself and how that is such a shift from identifying with just the body and the personality. When we think we're only this body and personality, we can live with a lot of fear, right? And we can fear death. But when Jesus said, I and the Father are one, I am in this world, not of it. I am consciousness. I come visit, and I wear this little form for a time, right? But the I am, is one with the Father. It is eternal, immortal being. So if after this body and personality complete, this earthly incarnation, our consciousness continues to exist, what happens to it? What happens to it? How does it exist? And what is its journey? Where does it go? I find that present-day physicists are starting to express these truths that the rishis, the Hindu rishis from 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, were already, sharing these teachings, these truths. And that is the immortality of our being. And one of my favorite physicists that I only found after Mom's passing is Ervin Laszlo. I have a dream of having Ervin, he's in Italy, but having him come to us on Zoom. Would you like that? Wouldn't that be amazing? I highly recommend his books. I think it can happen, so I'm going to hold that thought. But I really love his writing. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. He's a systems scientist. He's a physicist. He's a great pianist. He's an amazing being. But here's what he writes. We have good reason to believe that we are immortal. In the final count, who we are is not defined by our body, but by our mind. And whereas our body is mortal, our mind, like all consciousness in the cosmos, persists indefinitely and perhaps infinitely beyond space and time. Yeah, so he's describing mind as synonymous with consciousness, which the Buddhists do that too. They have a mind with a capital M, right? So I shared this once before, and I'm going to share it today, that on the day that my mom passed, we were at her house in Hornbrook, and we called an ambulance, and she was in the ambulance, and they wouldn't let me get in the back of the ambulance, so I had to follow the ambulance, and I was right behind the ambulance. And that whole drive from Hornbrook to Wairika, I was just sobbing uncontrollably. I was really having a time of it. And right when we got to that Minor Street exit in Wairika, all of a sudden I felt this incredible peace come over me. I just am feeling the chills right now. I felt this peace come over me, and I went, Mom, you left your body. And I looked at the clock, 4:49, and all the sobbing stopped, and I just could feel, it was her. I could feel her so clearly. And I could feel the peace, the incredible peace and stillness and bliss that she was in, this sense of freedom from that worn out old body, this sense of liberation. And I just was in an absolute altered state because I was so close to her, and we were very psychic. She was very psychic. She was a metaphysician. She taught me everything I knew from in my early years. So, I just felt this peace because I could feel what she was feeling. And when we got to the hospital, I ran right up to the ambulance as they were unloading her, and I heard the EMT say, her heart stopped 4 minutes ago. And it would have been exactly 4:49. Yeah. So soon after her physical passing, I found Ervin Laszlo's writings. And I really recommend them. He has a book called The Immortal Mind. He's got a lot of books, but that one's really powerful. And he writes on the Akashic field and the Akashic record, which deserves a talk unto itself. But Laszlo says when our body dies, we do not leave this world. We only transit into another phase of our existence. Realizing that our consciousness is immortal would give us the assurance we need to experience joy in living and tranquility in dying, right? So Mom told me just months before she passed, I had a friend who found out she had advanced cancer, and I was telling Mom, and I was feeling sad, and Mom said, I know you want me to be sad with you, but I am really looking forward to where I'm going, what I'm going towards. Like, she was sure she was going to have adventures, and she was ready. She was ready for that. And that has given me so much solace after she passed, right? If every human knew for sure, without a doubt, that we were returning or we were continuing, and fairly soon, I think we take much better care of this earth. And that's really where Ervin Laszlo goes with it. because we would all become immediate environmentalists, right? We would make nuclear weapons obsolete, like right away, right? We don't want to come back to that, right? So when Gary Zukav was here 2 weeks ago, I loved how he was talking about Linda's right here. You know, I have a song, actually I wrote it for my mom called I'm Right Here, which really describes that feeling. And I related to that because that's how I experienced Mom, you know. He said, oh no, she's not on the other side of some veil. She's right here. And I knew Linda. In fact, Linda Francis and I went to visit Mother Mira in Germany in 1993 together. Yeah, so I just love him, feeling her presence. It fills me with joy because I feel the same. But being that my background's very yogic, Michael Singer was my first teacher who I met when I was 15. So I really have this reincarnation kind of instilled in me from an early age as a real thing, as something that I not only believe in, I feel is real. You know, and so I offer these thoughts today for you to just contemplate, to consider ideas, and of course, just tune into what's true for you. Let your heart and your own inner intuition have the final say. But it's interesting that the founders of Unity, Myrtle Fillmore and Charles Fillmore, they believed in reincarnation in no small part because they met Vivekananda. And Vivekananda was Ramakrishna, one of India's greatest saints, most revered saints, his premier disciple. And they met him at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago. And the very first Parliament of World Religions was in 1893. Isn't that cool? And you know, the World Parliament of Religions, that very first 1893 meeting where Charles met them, that is considered the origin of the modern interfaith movement, which has a lot of meaning for us, especially here we are, you know, we're welcoming new members. We are an interfaith movement and center. And it gets more interesting. Amma first was invited to speak and first spoke at the World Parliament of Religions in 1993, 100 years later. And that's the year I met her, so yeah, it's amazing. And okay, here's one more interesting point, that some of the closest disciples around Alma that have been with her the longest, they believe she's a reincarnation of Ramakrishna. Yeah, so it's just, oh, I got chills. It's so neat. So reincarnation, it's also known as rebirth, or it's called transmigration of the soul. So in other words, the soul migrates, it moves. And it's not only a tenet in Hinduism, but Buddhism, many different sects of Judaism, the Native American tradition, paganism, and even the ancient Greeks, Plato and Socrates, they were proponents of reincarnation. And it goes way back. So there's a lot of research and evidence for reincarnation. Laszlo really dives into it. But there isn't as much information as to what happens between lives. And that is something I was never so curious about as I have been since Mom left. It's like, Mom, where are you? What's happening? I'm so curious. I'm so curious. The Tibetan Buddhists know the most. They describe it in the most detail. And so I love the lamas at Kyaggyu. I've taken their class on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Highly recommend that. And I just recommend reading that. And I love Sogyal Rinpoche's interpretation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. But with Mom, something happened. You know, that first 30 days, I felt so able to commune with her mental body. And I felt like we did this life review. We did all this work. I saw things I hadn't seen about the way I was, right? It's like the ego veils got removed and I saw, wow, it wasn't all your fault, right? I had so much that I brought that I needed to grow through and heal. And so we just did this incredible work of forgiving everything, you know, in our lives, in our family, in our ancestry. But after about 30 days, it got quieter. It got a lot quieter. And I felt like she had entered either the all that is beyond the mind, so there wasn't any mental body or thought happening, or maybe she was in a womb already, and merging and feeling that oneness with the earthly mother, you know. So here's what Laszlo says. He says, the journey that led from the previous and now deceased body to the new body is seldom revealed. Yet if this journey takes up a finite amount of time, there should be some traces of it in the transiting consciousness. And then he describes all these thousands of cases of reincarnation that he studied, and specifically about that interval between the demise of the former personality and then the reappearance in another body. So he said the most frequent interval appears to be under a year, but periods of several years have been reported as well, which corresponds with the Tibetan view. The Tibetan view is that, you know, it's about 21 to 49 days. 49 days being the longest period in the Bardo, and that's usually reserved for lamas. They take the longest in the Bardo. So Laszlo's research, you know, and the Tibetans, they basically say that the time between lives is 10 months to a year, you know. And it's you know, it's their opinion. You don't know for sure. How can we really know? But there are fascinating studies of children that remember their previous life. And this was the most interesting study I found. It's from Tucker and Sharma. They studied 2,500 children that could remember, that had memories. And they described 4 kinds of memories. The first one is remembering their, let's see, where is it? Remembering the deceased person's funeral. We had Mom's funeral in the backyard, and I know she loved it. I know she loved it. The second thing they remember is other earthly events. So things that they tend to really notice, you know, what's happening in their home and with their things and all. The third memory is memory of an extraterrestrial realm, and that could just be a different realm, not necessarily some other planet or something, but more a sense of there's other realms, right? And then finally, the last memory is conception and rebirth. So with Mom, I had all these dreams, and I started to get really good at invoking a dream. Like I'd have a dream, and I'd want to actually be hugging her in the dream and saying, I love you. And so I would invoke that, and I did get that a couple times. So I was really, really, woke up so happy. But the best dream with Mom was we went to this lake, and it was lined in this shining black rock. It was like black rock I've never seen, and it was filled with the most beautiful clear water. And there was an interesting kind of sun shining. It was almost like moonlight. It was like really soft sun. It was not as bright as our sun. And we jumped in this lake, and we were swimming around, and we were laughing and smiling, and we were so happy in the water. It felt like silk. It felt like no water I'd ever felt. And then I woke up, and I just was like, wow, Mom. I felt like she showed me another world, another realm. It was just so profound. And I write down my dreams. So I got a Native American book on dreams, and they feel that the dream world is more real than this world. So that was also helping me in examining the dreams. We have a speaker coming in August, Marcia Emery. She wrote a book on intuition and dreams. I'm going to have her come speak. So these children, they recalled their previous personality by name, even nickname. Yeah, and they were able to give verifiable accounts of the previous personality's mode of death. 74% got that right. They were accurate, and they could give very specific details. And, you know, the findings found that the reincarnation, where they were reincarnated, happened not that far from where they had lived. The average was 160 miles. And this is all Laszlo and his friends doing this research. So, of course, I find myself wondering, Mom, are you here? Like, I'm in love with every baby that I see. I don't want to be weird or anything, but I'm looking at that baby, you know, it's just like I have this sense that I would recognize her soul. And for some of you, this might sound far-fetched, and I know we don't talk about this that much, but for 600 years in Tibet, 600 years, there was a series of unmistakable reincarnations of the Dalai Lama that have been recognized. This is the Dalai Lama speaking. The Dalai Lama describes reincarnation, and that the reincarnation is able to recount his previous life and speak about it. He's able to identify possessions that belong to him. He's able to recognize people that he was close to in just the very last life. So I feel like we're becoming conscious in ways. We're opening our mind to possibilities that maybe we've never fully opened to. You have to remember that all of humanity at one point was absolutely sure this earth was flat, right? And if you said to them, no, actually the earth is round, they would have said, no way, you're silly, that's ridiculous, right? We'll sail right off the edge if we go sailing, right? So it's important to remember that and stretch your mind and just consider the possibilities. The Tibetans, Dalai Lama, this is important now because we can help people in their bardo time. And this is something that I really committed myself to for 60 days. The Dalai Lama says there are two ways in which someone can take rebirth after death. Rebirth under the sway of karma and destructive emotions, and rebirth through the power of compassion and prayer. And so, of course, the Tibetans give instructions on how to support a soul during that bardo time. But it was, for me, so intuitive. It's like I knew what to do. It's like I felt that with my dad, too. And I just intentionally devoted myself to just a lot of meditation. I was basically in a constant communion and meditation with her. So Laszlo says we're embarking on an era of conscious immortality, a new phase in the history of human life on this planet. And we're shifting out, and we need to shift out of that mentality, get all we can because we only live once. That's really, that attitude is not good for the planet, right? So Irvin talks about how science is showing us our consciousness is eternal. And we quite possibly inhabit many lifetimes, many bodies over lifetimes. So the last thing I want to speak on is values, because it's so important what our values are. And it's so important in community, and it's so important to explore what our values are and really assess often how we are living them, especially for our planet. That's important. So I want to hear from you just for a minute. I want you to just call out one thing that is deeply important that you deeply value. Just anybody. Breathing. Love. Beauty. Self-worth. Forgiveness. Yeah. Community. Compassion. My heartbeat. Yes. Connection. What is that? Honesty and nature. Honesty. Yes. Nature. Yes. Joy. You have a lot of great values. What was that? Good health, Lois. Thank you. Touch. Yes. Respect. That's key. Beauty. Double beauty. Peace. Thank you. Thank you. Irvin speaks 10 values that he got from the values researcher Karen Miller. And you've said a lot of these, but they are values he feels help us flourish. And it's funny because the first one is unity, the second one is community. Isn't that great? The third one is life, my heartbeat, breathing, right? The fourth one is freedom. Zawa, you write about that. The fifth one is connection, sustainability, creativity, empowerment. This is something I really feel like we're moving towards. We are a whole new paradigm of spiritual community, a paradigm of equals, a paradigm of co-creators, a paradigm of us all empowering ourselves and really growing our self-responsibility, right? Number 9 is choice. And you have to remember, not every country has choice, right? And our choices might be taken away. We have to guard our choices. They need to be a really high value for everyone. And then the last one is integrity. Integrity. I put all those in a sentence. This could be our new vision statement, actually. Let me read it. We are unity in community. We are life itself, experiencing freedom through empowering heart connection, living sustainably, fostering creativity, empowering our highest awakened consciousness, and choosing to live a life of integrity. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Living a more ethical life. So the last thing I want to say is that, you know, both religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, they do talk about ultimately becoming free of the cycle of birth and death and rebirth. That is the ultimate possibility. They call it nirvana in Buddhism. In Hinduism, they call it release from samsara, so that we can get off this wheel, right? And that is best described. I have to mention this. It's a profound resting in a blissful union, you could say, with the infinite of all that is. And I believe that as we get really good at doing that while in the body, then we have the choice after we leave. Do we want to reincarnate or not? It's our choice. And at that level, we're coming back to be bodhisattvas. We're coming back to serve others and to uplift the world. So in closing, I hope it's been helpful. I hope this has piqued your curiosity. You know, life after physical death and how we might live differently, knowing that our mind, knowing that our consciousness is immortal. And, you know, maybe loosening that fear of death, maybe dissolving that a bit more. And also knowing that we'll see our loved ones again. I also have a philosophy. I have an idea that we travel as pods. Even, you know, couples can travel together, but I feel like with our family, we're so close that we're traveling as pods. It's just a sense I got and something I felt from my mom from the other side. So let us be inspired to make this world a better place, knowing it just might be our home for a much longer time than we realize. I just invite you to remember my song, Remind Me of Eternity, remind me I am always free, remind me to live fearlessly. Thank you all. Om Shanti. Thank you.